Hello everyone, welcome back to the Holy Comforter Episcopal Church YouTube Bible study. I'm Jimmy Abbott, the priest here at Holy Comforter, and I have a few reflections on the gospel passage for this upcoming Sunday, which is taken from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 2 through 16. These past couple of weeks in Mark's Gospel, we've had some difficult passages. Remember, last week it was Jesus saying to cut off your hands and your feet if they cause you to stumble. This Sunday, this is Jesus talking about marriage and divorce, and if you divorce and marry someone else, you're committing adultery. It hits us in a raw place, I think, because we all know people whom we love and care about, and maybe even some of you who have been married and divorced and remarried, and we kind of have to circle, what is Jesus saying about marriage and remarriage and adultery and divorce? What did it mean in the first century Jewish context, and what does it mean in the 21st century American context? Now, just one point about this that I really want to hit home, and I think this is one of the keys that unlocks this passage. If you look back at verse 1 of chapter 10, it says that Jesus went to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan, and the crowds gathered around him, and as was his custom, he began to teach them. This is really important. We have to remember, we have to ask ourselves, who else was teaching in this area beyond the Jordan? It was John the Baptist. And what did John the Baptist talk about all the time? He talked about how the king of the Jews at the time, that would be King Herod, had married his brother's ex-wife. So Philip and Herod are brothers. Philip is married to another woman named Herodias. I know it's unfortunate their names are so similar. Philip and Herodias get a divorce, and then Herod marries Herodias. This is expressly forbidden in the Old Testament law, both in Leviticus and in Deuteronomy, and I'll silence that a second. So, as you can see, what they're really asking about here is much of what they had been asking John the Baptist. It's not so much, Jesus, what do you think about marriage and divorce and remarriage and adultery? It's, Jesus, what do you think about King Herod? What do you think about his marital life? Is he committing adultery? Is he sinning? It's a political question, more so almost than it is a moral or ethical question. I think this is just so interesting for us. A lot of times we read this and we just sort of skim the surface saying, oh, this is Jesus talking about marriage and remarriage and divorce and whatnot, and that's what they thought way back when, and we think something different now. No, actually, this is a political question. Jesus, what do you think about King Herod and his marriage to Herodias? And Jesus is going to sort of stir the pot a little bit, like John the Baptist before him. He stirs it up a little bit. And this is where we get this teaching on divorce and remarriage as adultery. I mean, Jesus is calling King Herod, who's the king of the area, an adulterer. I mean, this is why John the Baptist got his head chopped off. So we see deeply in the Gospel of Mark is this hard political message. So there are a couple things to take from this. I think a lot of times, I've heard it, that people don't like it when sermons or religion becomes political. They say that they would prefer the church be a sort of a refuge from all of that, a refuge from that divisiveness and that rhetoric that is so political, especially in the current context. Well, what I would say is, unfortunately, Jesus was political. Remember, he was crucified, and the charge against him was that he called himself the king of the Jews. Here he is talking about how the king is an adulterer. I mean, Jesus is speaking politically, and he's speaking directly to the powers that be. The other thing I think is interesting is that we in the church, when we say, oh, don't bring politics into it, as if we're saying that politics is less than, and that our common life, what is out there is sort of, is dirty and nasty, and what is here in the church should be pure and holy. I actually pray and hope for what is out there, our government, our political life, our societal life, our life together in the world, be just as holy and righteous as the life that we hope to lead within the church. So I would actually say that we should bring these things up within the church, because that should flow outward, and that the church should be affecting good, positive change and positive influences in the wider world, including our political world. Finally, I think it's so interesting that in this last week we have been discussing how a man, an individual's private, personal life, if that makes him fit for public office or not. Along with millions of other Americans, I listened to and watched the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing with Brett Kavanaugh and Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. And it's so interesting, right? Because the whole question was, it's as if the Pharisees were talking to Jesus. And we get this question, is this man, what they were asking was, is this man, King Herod, fit for office? And we are asking the same questions today. I think it's because we all know deeply within us, and Jesus speaks about this, that what is in our hearts, who we are in our most intimate, personal parts of our lives, is inherently connected with our political public life. And so we're asking all of these same questions again. I do not mean for those to be politically expedient remarks or to make a comment on those proceedings, though I do have opinions, as I'm sure you do as well. I just think it's very interesting that there's so much commonality of the Pharisees asking Jesus about whether he thinks Herod is fit for office. Sounds so much about what we are conversing about now in our political life. So thank you for joining me in this conversation. I know it's a little bit longer than most of my videos, but hey, this is an important topic, and I pray that you study and reflect and read on Mark chapter 10, and maybe that will help inform us going forward in our political life in this country.